Okay, so I should explain. Actually, basically, I was fascinated professionally by the same things that Joe was fascinated by professionally. This book is, from the point of view of an economic researcher, the thing that really grabs you is that it does this kind of unified field theory where it takes together the theory of economic growth, the theory of the distribution of income between different factors, between capital and labor, and the theory of the distribution of wealth and income among individuals. And it at least sketches out the way that they can all come together. And I thought, initially preparing for this event myself, I want to talk about that. And then I realized, no way I could do it in 10 minutes. So when Joe started to do it, I thought, no, Joe, you're not going to. It is fantastic stuff, and we want to hear more. But it's so in fact, this is, and it is something. Whatever else we say here, you do need to appreciate that there's a level of depth in this analysis, and a level of sort of a sense of intellectual frontiers opening that is hard to explain unless you're in the business yourself. What I thought I would do instead is go a little bit meta and talk really about why are you all here, and why are whoever is watching this, why are you watching? Why has this book had such an enormous impact? Why is this something that is hitting with such force now? And I think I have some perspective on this because I've worried about these issues of inequality for a long time. My first popular book, Age of Diminished Expectations, which was put out in 1989, had a chapter on inequality, including the 1%. At the time, by the way, it was originally published under the auspices of the Washington Post, and they wanted me to take the chapter out. They said nobody wants to hear about that, but that in itself tells you something. And my version of the history of the whole list, there has been a lot of resistance to the notion that what is in fact happening to us is happening. And there have been a series of moments that I think of as being, oh yeah, guess what moments. And Piketty's book is the latest and most important. Actually, he's responsible for at least two of these moments. So the first one was, as it became increasingly apparent during the 1980s that inequality was sharply on the upswing, there was a lot of denialism, a lot of attempts to deny that anything was really happening. And it took some time before it really, at a certain point, that even the survey data that Janet Gornick talked about, it made it clear that there'd been a dramatic shift in the way that our society was evolving. And you could say, oh yeah, guess what? Just look at the census survey data. You can't deny this at any point. Which didn't stop people from continuing to deny it. One thing you learn in this debate is that old arguments never go away, no matter how thoroughly refuted. They always come back. And actually, Thomas says a few things about that as well. The ability of elites to find people defending their position regardless. But then there was a next phase, which is still not entirely over, when people say, okay, well, there's some rise in inequality, but what it's really about is it's about education. And what you're looking at is, well, the top 20%, the well-educated people are doing well, and the rest are doing bad. And you will still find people writing things saying, oh, never, what's the stuff about the 1%? What matters is the inequality between the highly educated and the less well-educated, and we should address that. And that's certainly not a non-existent issue, but at a certain point, and to a large extent, thanks to the work of Piketty and the Piketty school, I guess we could say, we got to say, oh yeah, guess what? It turned out that a very large part of the rise in inequality was, in fact, at the very top. It was not the highly educated pulling away from the rest, or not solely or even mostly. It was, in very large part, the 1% pulling away from the next 19, and in fact, the 0.1% pulling away. That it really was and is a very dramatic. It is the very top that's driving a lot of what we're seeing in the changes in our society, that was news, and it's still rejected by some people, but I think it's very important. It's clearly a very big deal, yeah, that's I like to say, people think that it's about education. I like to say that high school teachers and hedge fund managers have similar amounts of education, so it's not exactly the same evolution of incomes. Now, even within that, there is if people concede that, and of course, again, no argument ever goes away in this debate, but if people concede that, they still say, well, okay, but this is not like Gilded Age inequality. or Belle Epoque inequality. This is because what we have is an inequality of earned income, that people are making a lot of money. Certainly, we have some people who are earning lots of money, but it's not. It's wealth based upon, or it's income based upon what people can do, and therefore, in some sense, deserved. And that's a questionable thing itself. And there's a lot of talk about there's a whole school of writing. You see this quite often that says, well, look, take a look at star actors or athletes. Nobody else could do what they do, so it's right for them to be earning a vast amount. To which actually there's a little sort of a minor, oh yeah, guess what? Which is that actually, those are not, people like that are not an important part of the 1%. It's overwhelmingly business executives. So if we're actually asking who we're talking about, we're pretty much talking about executives. But even so, the argument was this is somehow earned income, it's not inherited wealth, and to which capital in the 21st century is a gigantic, oh yeah, guess what? It's still true that in the United States, a large part of the increase in inequality since 1980 is about earned income, or at least labor income, whether you really think it's earned or not. But Thomas says that that's already about a third of it is capital. So in fact, we're already talking about substantial amount. And the higher up in the income distribution you go, the more capital is responsible. And furthermore, it's moving. And you can see, now there's the charts, there's the data in the book, there's the logic of the arguments, but also once you're sensitized to it, you start to realize. You look at the Forbes 400, which is not, again, a great scholarly, careful data source, but still useful. You discover that, yeah, there's Warren Buffett and Bill Gates up there at the top, but also 4 Waltons and 2 Kochs in the top 10, that there's a lot of inherited wealth already, and that an awful lot of the people further down the distribution are like 80 years old, and so there's about to be a lot of inherited wealth in the top of the income distribution. We're clearly moving in that direction, even in a way that will make it increasingly difficult to argue that ours is an earnings-based inequality. It will look increasingly like a wealth-based inequality, and that's a revelation. I think we haven't caught up with it. Even the liberals have not caught up with it. Piketty's, he's got Jane Austen and Balzac. I think our cultural reference tends to be Oliver Stone. And the fact of the matter is that Gordon Gekko was a long time ago. That movie was 27 years ago. And Gordon Gekko is a predator, but he's a self-made predator. Well, these days, you're more likely to be dealing with Gordon Gekko's heirs. And so we're actually, our picture, even on the left, our picture of what's happening is actually rapidly getting out of date because we are moving towards patrimonial capitalism. On the political economy, so the fear many of us have expressed, and Joe has expressed it, and it's implied very much in Piketty, of a spiral in which the concentration of wealth leads to a concentration of power, which leads to policies that reinforce that concentration of wealth. I think that becomes a much more compelling story as you start to realize that it is about wealth. It's one thing to have people who are earning high incomes lobby for policies that let them keep more of those incomes. But it's much stronger if we're talking about dynasties that are able to push for policies that solidify the position of their dynasties. The logic of fearing a political spiral that leads you further and further into oligarchy is really quite compelling and disturbing. It's not one, actually, that even on the model that's underlying in the book, it's not one that goes on forever. There is, in fact, a limiting equilibrium distribution of wealth where Pareto, where R minus G drives everything, which is one of the things that I'm having fun with professionally. But it would presumably be much more unequal, even than what we see today. And one of the things you learn from capital is that we have an income distribution in the United States that is about as unequal as that of Belle Epoque Europe, but we're still evolving towards greater inequality. So we are heading towards a super level of inequality in the United States on current policies that will be like nothing you've seen before. Just the last thing to say, to come back to it, this is all, sorry, one last thing. Political economy, I've found the discussion of the politics of the Third Republic, I think I've got the right republic, right? The Third Republic in France. Fascinating, because there you had egalitarian ideology, but highly unequal reality, and in fact the egalitarian ideology used to disguise what was going on, because you said, well, how can you say that we're unequal? Everybody has equal rights, and we've broken up the aristocratic estates, and there's many shades of that in U.S. debate. I mean, we now have Rick Santorum saying that class is not an un-American concept. We have no classes in this country, and so we can't talk about this at all. Okay, just the final word. It's a fantastic. It's intellectually fascinating. There's a level of depth to the analysis. It sort of solves problems that people have worried at for decades, and does it very elegantly. And let me just say a plug for the translator. It has to have been a wonderfully written book in French, but it's also a fantastically written book in English. And there are many ways I would have thought of describing the growing role of inheritance. But the phrase, the past devours the future, just in itself conveys so much more than anything I would have ever thought of saying. So read this book. Buy it, read it, and take it to heart. Thanks.